So I've been born and raised in Hawaii, lived a little bit on the mainland, and now having been back in Hawaii for 10 years. Man, it's crazy. You tend to learn a thing or two. And I want to share some of the life lessons I've learned so far because of the experiences I've had in Hawaii. So I hope that you enjoy some good old talk story, and please share some of the life lessons that you've learned over the years in the comments below. And also thank you to Authentically Charles for putting out his video about life lessons, which really inspired me to think of the things that I've learned in Hawaii. Aloha is easy to say but hard to do. In Hawaii we talk a lot about aloha, the aloha spirit, but what exactly is that? Now, I'm not speaking of the Olelo Hawaii definition of aloha, nor the Hawaii Revised Statutes definition, but the aloha spirit as is demonstrated and essential to the foundation of local culture in Hawaii. It's that unwavering generosity and kindness and forgiveness and grace that is extended to everyone, not for what they do or who they are, but simply because they are. They are a person, and so they are shown aloha. And maybe my understanding of aloha is unrealistic or unattainable, but it's what I observed in my own family and the families of others I respect and want to emulate. It's a demonstration of the best of ourselves and surrendering and relinquishing the worst and most entitled parts of who we are. This is a lesson I'm continuing to learn every day here in Hawaii. It's never easy when someone slights you, especially to your face. And depending where you're from, the local brother or sister inside wants to jump out and attack. But I'm learning to practice this even when circumstances are tough. Okay, so there was this one time we went to the grocery store and I was definitely tested. The grocery store was super busy and we just waited in line for about 25 minutes to check out. It was just very, very crowded. It wasn't a good time. I'm a pretty patient guy, but even 25 minutes starting to push my limit already, but just held my tongue. Now on the way out, we stopped at the customer service line to get these little promotional coins for this claw machine that they give to the customers. And as we were starting to approach the line where you enter the customer service, this Korean woman from the other side is approaching, but she's coming from the opposite direction. So technically, I'm standing in the entrance. So I'll put up a diagram to kind of show what's going on, but I'm technically standing in the entrance for the customer service line, and she's just parking her cart. And so she would have to park her cart and stand behind me. So I step up to the counter and I just, excuse me, can I get help? And then the lady says, excuse me, actually, I was first in line. And I'm looking at her thinking, no, you weren't first. I was in line first. You see, where I'm standing, this is the beginning of the line. You may have parked your cart first, but you gotta actually go in line, Like you gotta stand in the line. You can't just park your cart and say you're the first in line. But you know what? I decided to let her go and she was helped first. And as I stood there waiting to be helped for what felt like a week, all of these thoughts started brewing in my mind. Like, are you kidding me? I just waited 25 minutes in line. I got a fussy kid in the grocery cart. I was in line first, clearly. And yes, I saw you approaching from the opposite direction, but the line starts here. I was here first in line. That's how it works. And then I started replaying. Maybe you get like that, but then you start replaying the events of what happened just like 10 seconds ago, and it goes over and over again. And I'm trying to break down what happened as if I'm like a referee reviewing a football play or something. Now, fortunately, another customer service employee who had seen what had just happened decided to call me over and help me out. And then we were on our way. Now, I admit that I was pretty pissed off. I mean, piss off. I was more like piss off, yeah. I mean, I'm a Kaneohe boy, and I was getting kind of riled up, And as we were following her outside the grocery store into the parking lot, man, I was really tempted to call her out and ask her, hey, what was that about? I had to let it go. And that was really hard to practice aloha in that moment. I'll say that it took me at least the rest of the day to stop thinking about it. And even now, as I'm thinking about it, I'm trying to get all like sweaty and, But I try to look at those situations through the lens of aloha. And maybe from her perspective, she was first in line. I would disagree with that because of where the line starts, but maybe she thought that she was first in line. Maybe she was in a rush to get home, to do something busy. Maybe she just thought she was entitled. I don't know, but that shouldn't affect me, and that shouldn't affect my extension of grace and understanding to her. Like I said, I'm still learning this one. I'm learning this while I'm driving on the roads. I'm still learning this while I'm trying to find a parking spot at the mall. Because I think we like to think that aloha is just like a shaka and this hang loose attitude, but I see it as much more. It's a warmth of embrace for better or for worse. And it's something that if Hawaii ever loses, we lose our essence. And that's what makes us unique. Not the beaches, not the nice weather, but it's that aloha spirit. And so I hope that never happens. No one really thinks about Hawaii, or to put it more tactfully, there's a world beyond where you're from. When you grow up in Hawaii, but probably anywhere really, you tend to think that where you're from is the most important place in the world. There's just hyper inward focus because we live here in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and everyone else with their problems and issues is so far away. When you live in Hawaii for a long time, this center of the universe feeling becomes further exemplified, and soon you just start to believe it because it seems like nothing outside of Hawaii impacts your daily life. But the best thing I ever did was leave Hawaii to gain a better perspective of where Hawaii sits in the world. And I didn't just go to Vegas or California or Japan for a vacation, but I spent some time actually living away from Hawaii, where they call slippers flip-flops and they don't eat rice. I had to pay my own rent and I had to buy groceries at grocery stores that I never heard of, like King Soopers and Trader Joe's. I still remember when I went to the mainland for college. I knew absolutely no one in Colorado and I didn't know what to do as an 18-year-old kid who had never really left Hawaii before. For the first time, I had no family around and hardly anyone looked like me. I soon realized that nobody cared about Hawaii. Sure, they were interested that I was from Hawaii since they knew me, but no one cared about what was going on in Hawaii. Nobody cared what my friends and family were up to, none of it. And they didn't want to celebrate holidays like we did with rice and shoyu chicken. Instead, I had to eat rolls, bread, pasta. Only when I would return to Hawaii would I feel like people suddenly cared about all the things that I cared about. And in those first few days being back in Hawaii, I finally felt like I was at home, like I was at a place where I belonged. But then I started noticing something after those first few days. I get bored. And over the years, each time I returned home, it was like I viewed Hawaii a little bit differently because I had experienced all these different things. And yet Hawaii seemed to remain the same. The people did the same things on the weekends. They ate at the same places, went to the same beaches, talked about the same things over and over. And at first I felt kind of lost. I felt like I was stuck because I loved Hawaii, but I was utterly bored of it. And I wanted to actually go back to Colorado or Oregon or California. And maybe you can relate to that. Those places were not my home, but they were becoming more and more familiar the longer I remained there, and they were more interesting. Whereas Hawaii was just the same. But the lesson was finally learned when I decided to move back. Moving back home, and Hawaii will always be considered my home, just like I'm sure for a lot of people it's the same. But moving back home put it all back into perspective for me, that I didn't have to feel lost anymore. And while I was away, I gained this huge perspective. Seeing Hawaii for what it was in the grand scheme of the whole universe humbled my view of Hawaii and really made me appreciate it for what it is. Hawaii is not perfect. It's also not the center of the universe. There's a world outside of it where people do things. But it's where I'm from and it's where I'm raising my family. Family is the most important thing in life. If you spend any time in Hawaii, you'll know how much families are involved in each other's lives. I'm not just talking about the close quarters that are often shared as 3 or 4 generations get crammed into living under the same roof. Rather, it's a level of involvement that families have in the day-to-day aspects of life. I'm just thinking of the hundreds or maybe thousands of grandparents each day that watch their grandkids because the parents have to work, or family parties where we don't need the fanciest home or interior decor. Just put a fold-out table on the ground and have enough food and people just gonna talk story. And this high value of family gets passed on from generation to generation. I think back to when I was growing up, I used to go to my grandma's house at least 3 times a week, including most weekends. I must have walked into their house thousands of times. I can still see it in my mind. They're sitting there on the kitchen table, my grandpa with his newspaper and my grandma with her tea, and they're both listening to KSSK on the radio. As soon as I open the front door, my grandma gets up, grabs a plate for me and scoops some rice, and then she hands me the plate, and then I grab the Spam, bacon, eggs, whatever she cooked, ham, and I just put it on the plate. And then I just book it to the couch in the living room, and I change the channel from Benny Hinn to cartoons, and then I eat my breakfast. Thinking back, I can't recall much else that I did when I was a little kid there, except eat and watch a lot of TV, maybe play video games, play with my cousins. But my grandparents were involved in my life so much that That's why I think about them every single day, even after they died almost 20 years ago. I can confidently say that family is what I miss the most when I was away from Hawaii, and it's really the only thing keeping me here. It's the reason why I moved back, to be closer to my family and to make sure I'm here if and when my parents need me. And this is a responsibility that many have already undertaken, to take care of an elderly family member in those last 5 to 10 years of their life. Author Marge Kennedy once said, "In truth, a family is what you make it. It is made strong not by number of heads counted at the dinner table, but by the rituals you help family members create, by the memories you share, by the commitment of time, caring, and love you show to one another, and by the hopes for the future you have as individuals and as a unit." I don't think I could have learned the importance of family anywhere else except Hawaii. And I think that's why it's so hard for a lot of people to leave. It's what keeps many of us going, even when times are tough. It's why we put up with so much to be here, when we know that life would be easier in other places. A little initiative goes a long way. I quickly realized that a little initiative goes a long way in Hawaii, because Hawaii has a lot of big talkers and not a lot of doers. I mean, sorry, but it's true. Part of it may stem from our laid-back culture where we don't want to rock the boat, and our human nature to gravitate towards homeostasis where things just kind of remain the same. But if there's something that you want to do, I say chance them. But just know that in the beginning, it's going to be lonely and you'll likely be the only one doing it, but that's okay. A few years ago, I started noticing that there was a lot of rubbish on the ground where I worked. Whenever I would take walks around the building, I would notice the trash, and I'm wondering, isn't anybody else bothered by this, or is it just me? And when I would bring this up with others, there was this shoulder shrug of, what do you want me to do about it? So eventually I decided to do something about it. During my lunch break, I started picking up rubbish once a week around the building. With my gloves and trash picker, it would only take about 30 minutes, but afterwards it looked a lot better. And I committed to doing this for just a few months, just to see if people would notice and if it in fact made a difference. And you know what? They did. When people would walk by as I pick up trash, they would stop and ask what I was doing. And after I would explain it, they would thank me and then they would just walk away. And you know what? That was nice. But I wasn't doing it for the validation. I was doing it because I was curious to see what would happen and if I could commit to doing something menial that made a huge difference, that helped everyone. And what's nice is some of my coworkers later joined me and we finished cleaning up around the building a lot faster. It soon became a social thing that only took less than 30 minutes a week, which was great. And all of it started not because I talked a big game, but because I just went out and I did something about it. And this YouTube channel is a result of that type of initiative as well. I would talk big about how come there's no YouTube channels about Hawaii, or there's no Hawaii-based YouTube channels that I was interested in. And then I just started one. And yeah, it was kind of shame in the beginning. I didn't know if anyone would watch, if this would grow into anything, but I kept at it. And that little initiative over 3 years ago has helped so many people, both locals and non-locals. I'm not yet 40 years old, so I still got a ways to go, more lessons to learn. But I'd love to hear what some of the life lessons that you've learned over the years in the comments below. So thanks for watching, and aloha.